Sit back and enjoy 2 hours of fascinating facts you didn't know. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Let's get started. The Venus flytrap gets its name because its shape resembles female genitalia. The name refers to Venus, the Roman goddess of love and beauty, and originated at a time when some naturalists used fairly direct anatomical comparisons when describing plants. Its scientific name, Dionea muscipula, also has classical roots. Dionea refers to the goddess, and muscipula means mousetrap. Interestingly, this plant grows naturally only in a small region of North Carolina and South Carolina. In the state of Arkansas, the lung cancer rate among men is 40% higher than among women, which is attributed to the high presence of logging industries, sawmills, and diesel trucks. 20 of the 50 oldest people in the world are Japanese. Japan has stood out for decades for its high life expectancy and the large number of people who reach 100 years of age. The country currently has tens of thousands of centenarians, and women make up the overwhelming majority. Okinawa Prefecture became especially famous for the longevity of its residents, although other Japanese regions also have many people of exceptionally advanced age. Factors such as diet, medical care, and everyday habits are often studied to better understand this longevity. Marshmallows are a 4,000-year-old food that originated in ancient Egypt. They were originally made from the sap of the marshmallow plant that grows in marshes. Nearly 3 billion living people have never used the internet. Most of this population is concentrated in low-income countries and rural regions where digital infrastructure remains limited or too expensive. A lack of reliable electricity, affordable devices, and digital skills also makes access more difficult. However, the number decreases every year. The expansion of mobile networks and smartphones has allowed billions of people to connect for the first time over the past few decades. The Pizza Hut costume used in the movie Spaceballs weighed about 24 pounds and was built with a fiberglass frame, latex foam skin, steam jet hoses, pancake mix, and pizza toppings. It was so uncomfortable that the original actor refused to put it back on for additional filming. Ferrari and Lamborghini no longer make cars with manual transmissions. Both brands abandoned this type of gearbox as dual-clutch automatic transmissions became faster and more efficient for their supercars. The last Ferrari produced with a manual transmission was the California, while Lamborghini last offered the option in the Gallardo. Interestingly, used examples of some models equipped with traditional gear shifters have become especially sought after by collectors precisely because they represent the end of an era. In many Spanish-speaking countries, instead of the tooth fairy, they have Ratoncito Pérez, a mouse that collects teeth and leaves money for children. The character became especially famous through a story written in the late 19th century by Luis Coloma for the young King Alfonso XIII of Spain. In the story, the mouse lived with his family inside a cookie box in Madrid. Today, the tradition has many variations, and in some Latin American countries, he is simply known as Raton Pérez. According to a 2011 Yale University study, people who feel lonelier prefer longer, hotter showers and baths, while less lonely people prefer shorter, cooler showers and baths. The researchers linked this behavior to the psychological association between physical warmth and social warmth. In several experiments, they observed that people with greater feelings of loneliness tended to use the warmth of bathing more often. Interestingly, other studies have found links between physical temperature and the way we perceive social interactions. After the United States, India has the second largest English-speaking population in the world. English is one of the languages officially used by the Indian central government and has an important presence in universities, businesses, courts, technology, and the media. Its expansion began during the British colonial period, but continued after independence. India also has hundreds of languages and linguistic varieties, so English frequently serves as a common language between people from regions with different native languages. It was not revealed that Wolverine had bone claws beneath the metal until the 1990s. For years, many readers assumed that his famous claws had been added entirely during the process that coated his skeleton with adamantium. This changed in 1993, when Magneto ripped the adamantium from his body and it was discovered that Wolverine had natural bone claws. The revelation altered part of the character's history and established that the claws were part of his original mutation. Buildings on the Greek islands are partially whitewashed because lime was used as an inexpensive disinfectant that helped prevent cholera and other serious diseases in the early 20th century. The practice became especially common during epidemic outbreaks, and later became associated with the architecture of places such as the Cyclades. In addition to being inexpensive, the white coating helped reflect some of the intense Mediterranean sunlight. Over time, those white facades combined with colorful doors, windows, and domes became one of the most recognizable images of Greece. In China, motorcycles are required by law to be dismantled and destroyed 13 years after their registration, regardless of their condition. This regulation is part of China's mandatory vehicle retirement system and is intended to reduce safety risks and emissions associated with older vehicles. In addition, some major Chinese cities maintain additional restrictions on motorcycles, limiting their use or registration in certain urban areas. Cities such as Beijing and Shanghai have particularly strict controls, while other regions apply different rules depending on the type of vehicle. China also has one of the world's largest markets for two-wheeled vehicles, although electric motorcycles and scooters have gained an enormous presence on its streets in recent decades. One of the traditional ways of making snake wine in Okinawa involves chilling the viper with ice until it becomes motionless, then preparing and sewing it up. As it warms back up, the snake assumes a characteristic striking pose, which is the appearance many producers seek before preserving it in the drink. Protein-style burgers at In-N-Out actually have fewer grams of protein than regular burgers. The difference is that this option replaces the bun with lettuce leaves while keeping the meat, cheese, and other ingredients depending on the order. Even so, it usually has fewer calories and carbohydrates than the traditional version. Protein Style is part of In-N-Out's famous unpublished menu and can be ordered with different burgers from the chain. The widespread recommendation to drink 8 glasses of water a day to stay hydrated was based on a 1945 statement that had no medical evidence behind it. When coffee arrived in Europe from Arabia, it helped fuel the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. In its early days, the Royal Society of London often met in a coffee house rather than a tavern. During the 17th and 18th centuries, European coffee houses became important centers of conversation, news exchange, and intellectual debate. In London, they came to be known as penny universities because, for the price of a cup, people could listen to discussions about science, politics, commerce, and literature. Some even eventually gave rise to major financial and commercial institutions. The reason Amish men shave their mustaches is because they are conscientious objectors. They do not support war in any way or form, and because it was so common for military men to wear mustaches, they do the opposite. This custom dates back several centuries, when mustaches were closely associated with soldiers and European military authorities. Married Amish men usually grow beards but keep their upper lips shaved. The beard also traditionally serves as a sign of maturity and marriage within many Amish communities. Modesty was actually the reason René Laennec invented the stethoscope, as he did not feel comfortable placing his ear directly against a woman's chest to listen to her heart. In 1816, the French physician rolled several sheets of paper into a tube and discovered that he could hear internal sounds with surprising clarity. He later developed a wooden instrument shaped like a cylinder. Laennec also helped connect different lung sounds with specific diseases, turning auscultation into a fundamental tool of medicine. The microwave safe label on plastic containers only means that the container can withstand the intended heating without dangerously deforming, but it does not mean that it is chemically inert. Materials intended for food contact are also evaluated for the possible migration of substances under certain conditions of use. Heat, exposure time, and the type of food can influence that migration. For this reason, each container should only be used under the conditions specified by the manufacturer. Winston Churchill lived to the age of 90 despite smoking and drinking heavily, as well as being overweight. He was especially known for his cigars and his fondness for champagne, and he accumulated a considerable wine cellar. During his long life, he also suffered several health problems, including strokes. Churchill died in 1965, more than 20 years after leading the United Kingdom through much of World War II. There was a study sponsored by sugar companies in the 1960s and written by Harvard researcher D. Mark Hegstead that claimed sugar was harmless and that fats were what caused heart attacks. The theory that an asteroid caused the mass extinction of the dinosaurs did not emerge until 1980. Geologist Walter Alvarez noticed iridium, a substance found in meteorites and very rare on Earth, in a specific layer at the excavation site. He asked other geologists around the world to check whether they could find iridium at the same level. Since dinosaur fossils ended at that level, he wondered whether a meteorite could have wiped them all out. The largest food poisoning incident on an airline occurred on a Japan Airlines flight bound for Denmark, after 197 people became ill from contaminated omelets. Because of a shortage of Japanese to Danish translators, restaurant workers in Copenhagen were recruited to serve as medical interpreters. The United Kingdom and the state of Oregon are nearly the same size in terms of land area, but their populations are very different. According to the most recent estimates available, Oregon has around 4.27 million residents, while the United Kingdom has around 69.5 million. This means that despite occupying similar areas, more than 16 times as many people live in the United Kingdom as in Oregon. The Magna Carta of 1215 was the first document to put into writing the principle that the king and his government are not above the law. It was agreed upon between King John of England and a group of rebel barons at Runnymede, near the River Thames. Although much of its content addressed specific medieval disputes, some clauses concerning justice and liberties survived for centuries. Its influence reached much further and later inspired principles found in British and American constitutional law. There is a man named Andy George who made a chicken sandwich completely from scratch. He grew his own vegetables, traveled by plane to collect seawater to make salt, milked a cow to make butter and cheese, slaughtered a chicken, and grew wheat for the flour. The entire project took him 6 months and cost him $1,500. Arnold Schwarzenegger was originally going to play Kyle Reese in the 1984 movie The Terminator. During his conversations with director James Cameron, Schwarzenegger began explaining how he thought the Terminator should behave, including the way it should move and handle weapons. Cameron was so impressed that he ended up offering him the role of the cyborg. Schwarzenegger initially hesitated because the character had very few lines, but he eventually accepted. The role became one of the most recognizable of his career. The inventor of transparent adhesive tape called it Scotch because of a derogatory comment from the time that associated the term with being stingy in the application of adhesive. The story began with a tape created by Richard Drew for the company 3 Million during the 1920s, initially intended for automobile paint shops. A worker complained that the manufacturers had used too little adhesive and told them to take it back to their Scotch bosses, a term used at the time as a synonym for stingy. The nickname remained and eventually became one of the best-known tape brands in the world. Each pawn in chess has a specific name and profession based on its starting position on the board. In some historical European texts, the 8 pawns came to represent different trades and members of medieval society, such as farmers, blacksmiths, merchants, doctors, and laborers. These identities varied by region and period, so they were never a universal rule of chess. Today, pawns are normally distinguished by the piece or file in front of which they begin, such as the king's pawn, queen's pawn, or rook's pawn. 65% of the world's population is lactose intolerant. The ability to digest large amounts of milk throughout adulthood is actually a genetic trait that appeared and spread among certain populations historically associated with livestock farming. Lactose intolerance varies considerably by region and is especially common in parts of Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Many people can consume small amounts of lactose without discomfort, and fermented products such as yogurt or certain cheeses usually contain much less lactose than milk. One of the largest shopping malls in the world is in Iran and is the 4th largest worldwide. Kuwait has the 2nd largest, China holds 3 spots in the top 10, including the largest in the world, and the largest shopping mall in the United States, the Mall of America, is the 12th largest worldwide. After South Korea built a 325-foot flagpole with a 300-pound flag near the demilitarized zone, North Korea erected an even taller flagpole on its side of the border, standing about 525 feet tall and flying a 600-pound flag. Ferrari's iconic red color, Rosso Corsa, was originally required by racing regulations. In the early days of motorsports, international racing organizations assigned specific colors to represent different countries, and Italy was assigned red. There is a term for when 2 people are cousins through both of their parents. They are called double cousins. One example occurs when 2 brothers from one family marry 2 sisters from another family, making the children of both couples double cousins to one another. Genetically, this relationship is also unusual. Ordinary first cousins share an average of about 1/8 of their DNA, while double cousins share approximately 1/4. a proportion similar to that shared by half-siblings. The identity of the Somerton man was finally solved after 73 years with the help of forensic genealogy. For decades, authorities and academics had no idea who the mysterious man was whose body was found on a beach outside Adelaide, Australia in 1948. He turned out to be Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer from Melbourne who disappeared from public records in April 1947. At the beginning of the 20th century, Canada geese came close to extinction in the wild because of unregulated hunting. Some populations declined dramatically, and one large subspecies was even considered extinct until it was rediscovered in Minnesota during the 1960s. Protection laws, population restoration, and their extraordinary adaptation to parks, golf courses, and urban areas led to a massive recovery. Today, they are so abundant in some North American cities that they can even create problems involving wildlife management and coexistence with people. French pirate Olivier Levasseur supposedly threw a necklace containing a riddle into a crowd moments before his execution. The riddle led to his treasure, and he told the crowd to go find it if they could. The German supermarket chain Lidl opened a store in Dublin and installed glass floor panels to display archaeological ruins from the 11th and 18th centuries that were found at the site. Gary Sinise, the actor who played Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, has visited 174 military bases and 21 military hospitals around the world since 2003. Dodi Fayed, Princess Diana's partner, was a cousin of murdered Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Both were nephews of Saudi billionaire arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi. Italy was never a province of the Roman Empire. Instead, it had a special administrative status of domina provinciarum, meaning sovereign of the provinces. Agriculture expert Soloway planted a 2,000-year-old seed in 2005, and it not only germinated but also reproduced. The plant was named Methuselah and is a Judean date palm. There is a young couple in Japan who divorce and remarry every 3 years so they can take turns using their last names, all because they cannot agree on which name to keep. Jason Derulo's stage name is a phonetic adaptation of his last name, Derulo. In 2019, the Netherlands became the first country to completely ban the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. In July 2022, the Supreme Court of the Netherlands upheld the ban and made it permanent. Circuit City created a proprietary type of disposable digital video disc called DivX that could only be watched for 48 hours after the first viewing unless an additional fee was paid. The product's failure cost the company so much money in a single year that it is believed to have been partially responsible for its bankruptcy. There is an impact crater more than 25 miles in diameter buried beneath Chesapeake Bay. It was discovered in 1993 from oil drilling data, which revealed that before the impact, the Richmond, Virginia area was covered by dense tropical rainforest. Microwave ovens can superheat water, meaning its temperature can rise above the boiling point without the water actually boiling because of a lack of nucleation sites. Disturbing the water can cause all of it to boil instantly, creating violent bursts of steam. Captain Citrus was a fictional character based on Captain America created by the Florida Department of Citrus to promote the orange industry. Originally created in 2011 as Ollie the Orange, the state paid Marvel around $1 million in 2014 to redesign and publicly promote the character. Levi's uses a blank tab on 10% of its products to protect its trademark on the shape of the tab. The famous red tab first appeared in 1936 to distinguish the company's jeans from those of its competitors. Although it normally carries the word Levi's, some garments deliberately receive a tab without the name, retaining only its distinctive shape and placement. This practice helps legally reinforce that the tab itself serves as an identifying element of the brand. In 1984, Harvey Comics sued Columbia Pictures, claiming that the Ghostbusters logo was too similar to Fatso, the character from Casper the Friendly Ghost. As a result of the lawsuit, Fatso entered the public domain. The reason many African countries have green, yellow, and red in their flags is due to Ethiopian influence. The colors of the Ethiopian flag came to represent Pan-African ideology because the country avoided being dominated by colonial powers. The kakapo, a large, green, flightless parrot from New Zealand, has a life expectancy of up to 100 years. It is also the heaviest parrot in the world and one of the most unusual birds on the planet. It is nocturnal, and males produce deep, booming sounds to attract females during the breeding season. The species came close to extinction, so every known kakapo is currently individually identified and closely monitored by conservationists. The sudden United States stock market crash in 2010, in which $1 trillion in value was temporarily lost, was caused in part by Navinder Sarao, a man with autism who lived at his parents' home in London. Over 5 years, Sarao made $40 million in profits by manipulating high-frequency traders with a custom program. Queen ants can have a life expectancy of 20 to 30 years, and some worker ants can live for several years. This longevity is striking because males of many species survive for only a few weeks and die shortly after mating. A queen can store sperm obtained during her nuptial flights and use it for years to produce new generations without mating again. In some species, a single queen can lay millions of eggs throughout her lifetime. Producing 1-cent and 5-cent coins has cost more than their face value for years. In fiscal year 2025, manufacturing and distributing each 1-cent coin cost approximately 3 cents, while each 5-cent coin cost more than 13 cents. However, this situation changed significantly in November 2025, when the United States Mint ended regular production of 1-cent coins for circulation after 232 years. Existing coins remain legal tender and can continue to be used, while collector versions will continue to be produced in limited quantities. The move is intended to reduce costs and is estimated to save around $56 million per year. Because of a variation in the ABCC11 gene, most people of Asian ancestry have significantly less body odor than other populations. This genetic variant is especially common in East Asia and reduces certain secretions from the apocrine glands that skin bacteria transform into odor-producing compounds. The same gene also influences another curious trait, the type of earwax. The variant associated with less body odor usually produces dry earwax, while other variants are associated with wet earwax. Vesta Stout, an Illinois mother who worked at an ammunition plant during World War II, invented cloth duct tape. Charles Luckman decided to become an architect when he was working at a newspaper stand as a child and asked a woman what the bright lights above their heads were. She told him it was a chandelier and that an architect had put it there. Because all United States dollar bills are the same size, making it difficult or impossible for blind people to distinguish them, the United States Bureau of Engraving and Printing provides a free electronic device, the iBill Currency Identifier, that can identify the denomination of bills. The oxygen masks that drop down on airplanes are connected to individual chemical oxygen generators rather than to a supply of gaseous oxygen. This is much safer than keeping oxygen tanks on board, which would increase the risk of fires or explosions in the event of a leak or accident. Germany built giant artillery pieces during World War I, in which each shot wore down the barrel so much that the shells had progressively larger diameters and had to be fired in the correct order. Mexico, which abolished slavery in 1837, rejected the United States' request to return enslaved people who escaped south. Between 3,000 and 5,000 fugitive slaves fled to Mexican territory. One study found that more years of education correlate with greater life satisfaction, better health, and lower divorce rates, even after controlling for income. Other research has also linked more schooling with longer life expectancy, lower tobacco use, and more frequent participation in civic activities. In addition, its benefits can extend to the next generation, since parents' education is often associated with better academic outcomes for their children. The Paralympic Games began because of disabilities resulting from World War II. The 2024 edition was the first held in Paris, even though the city has hosted the conventional Olympic Games 3 times. 6-year-old Stormy Jones became the world's first successful recipient of a combined heart and liver transplant in 1984. She had a genetic condition that prevented her liver from removing cholesterol, which caused her to suffer 2 heart attacks. Former United States President Ulysses S. Grant and writer Mark Twain were close friends. Twain, aware of Grant's precarious financial situation after his presidency, offered him 70% royalties for the publication of his memoirs. After the United States Navy lost the submarine USS Thresher in 1963, it established a quality assurance program called SubSafe for its submarines. As a result, it went from losing 16 submarines for non-combat reasons in the previous 48 years to losing only the USS Scorpion, which had not been certified under SubSafe since 1963. The Maguire twins, promoted as the world's heaviest twins, suffered from obesity because of a case of rubella that affected their pituitary glands when they were 4 years old. Canadians love Kraft macaroni and cheese and actually call it Kraft dinner. Some even ignore the instructions and believe they have their own unique way of preparing it, such as adding sausages or cheese. It was created during the Great Depression and has been described as the true national dish of Canada. Edgar Allan Poe became a writer after a failed military career. He enlisted in the United States Army in 1827, failed as a cadet at West Point, and declared his intention to become a writer. His earliest works, a collection of poems, were written while he was in the Army. In 2018, an American halfpipe skier qualified for the Olympic Games despite having minimal experience. Olympic requirements stated that an athlete had to finish among the top 30 in several events. She simply looked for events with fewer than 30 participants, showed up, and skied without falling. The 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami was so powerful that it increased the speed of Earth's rotation and shortened the length of the day by 2.68 microseconds. There is a misconception that a landmine is armed when someone steps on it and only detonates when the foot is lifted, which is used to create tension in movies. In reality, the initial pressure detonates the mine immediately. The cinematic version appears in numerous movies and television series because it allows the character to remain motionless while others try to help. Real mines have many different mechanisms, and some operate through wires, sensors, or other systems, but the classic scene of keeping a foot pressed down to prevent an explosion is primarily a fictional device. Scotty Landreth was the winner of $1 million in McDonald's record promotion in 1988 when he was 13 years old. He had his mother collect the prize, but she squandered much of the money and allowed her partner to steal the rest. John Chapman, also known as Johnny Appleseed, did not just plant apple seeds wherever he went, but built entire nurseries, including protective fences to keep wildlife away. The nurseries were left in the care of neighbors who were allowed to profit from the trees, and he returned annually to tend to them. Mark Twain, the famous American writer and humorist, outlived his wife and 3 of his 4 children. His son Langdon died while still a baby, while his daughters Susie and Jean died before him. His wife, Olivia Langdon Clemens, died in 1904. Only his daughter Clara outlived Twain. The writer died in 1910, one day after Halley's Comet reached perihelion. Interestingly, he had been born just a few weeks after another appearance of the same comet. Carl Sagan originally wanted to include the Beatles song Here Comes the Sun on the Voyager spacecraft record, but the record company EMI refused. Lieutenant Quentin Roosevelt was shot down and killed during World War I and buried by the German army, making him the only child of a United States president to die in combat. There used to be a bedding ceremony during marriage in which the bride and groom were put to bed together in a bridal bed in front of numerous witnesses. In 16th century Germany, the guests would leave and play bagpipes and drums and celebrate loudly outside the room while the couple consummated the marriage. George Stanley, the designer of the Canadian flag, received death threats from people who opposed his design. The selection of a new flag caused an intense political debate during the 1960s, known as the Great Flag Debate. Stanley proposed the design of a single red maple leaf between 2 red bands, inspired in part by the flag of the Royal Military College of Canada. The new flag was officially raised for the first time on February 15, 1965. The Wilkes Land crater on Earth is a gravitational anomaly buried beneath the Antarctic ice sheet that is believed to be an impact crater. It is 3 times the size of the Chicxulub crater, which is credited with the extinction of the dinosaurs. For 30 years, between 110 and 120 boys were born in South Korea for every 100 girls, resulting in a surplus of 700,000 to 800,000 men who now have difficulty finding partners. In the 1990s, the CIA developed a robotic catfish named Charlie. This unmanned underwater vehicle was designed to collect water samples covertly and was controlled through a line-of-sight radio transmitter. Details of those missions remain classified. There is a Spanish town where 700 residents are descendants of a 17th century samurai who settled there after a Japanese embassy returned to its country. They all have the last name Japón. The town is Coria del Rio, near Seville, where some members of the Keicho embassy, which arrived in Spain in 1614 under the leadership of Hasekura Tsunenaga, remained. Over time, their descendants adopted the last name Hapon, which still distinguishes numerous local families. The town maintains cultural ties with Japan and has a statue of Hasekura beside the Guadalquivir River. Judd Nelson, the actor who played John Bender in The Breakfast Club, was nearly fired from the production for staying in character and harassing his co-star Molly Ringwald off camera. Sonora Carver, one of the first women to perform horse diving, continued the practice for another 11 years after becoming blind when she hit the water with her eyes open from the steel pier in Atlantic City. Horse diving was a spectacle in which a rider mounted a horse that jumped from a tower between about 39 and 59 feet into a body of water. In 2013, Jeff Bezos launched a 3-month expedition to recover an F-1 engine used in the Saturn rocket from the Apollo 11 mission, from a depth of about 13,800 feet on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean. The engine is currently at the National Air and Space Museum and is the only recovered F-1 engine that actually flew. The SuperDisk was a floppy disk invented by 3M in 1996 with a capacity of up to 240 megabytes. It had little success in North America and was discontinued in 2003. The average height of humans fell from 5 feet 10 inches for men and 5 feet 6 inches for women to 5 feet 5 inches and 5 feet 1 inch 10,000 years ago. It was not until the 20th century that average human height returned to pre-Neolithic revolution levels. Potatoes are not native to Ireland. They were cultivated by the Incas around 8000 before Christ and were first introduced to Europe by the Spanish in the 16th century. The Mobro 4000 was a garbage barge that left New York with 3,000 tons of waste in 1987. It made national headlines as it traveled along the coast looking for a place to unload, and after being rejected by 6 states and 3 countries, it finally unloaded 5 months later in Brooklyn. Michael Jackson joined Jimmy Carter in a vaccination campaign and gave concert tickets to more than 10,000 children as a reward for being immunized against preventable childhood diseases. Thomas Boylan built a cabin out of dinosaur bones in Wyoming in 1932. He died in 1947, and the structure has been put up for sale since then. Jamie Heineman from Mythbusters was one of the earliest competitors in Robot Wars, where people design robots that fight each other, but his robot Blendo was considered too dangerous for the competition. After conman John Rufo was convicted and sentenced to 17 years in prison, his bail was set at $10 million. Most of his immediate family put up their homes as collateral to pay the bail, after which Rufo disappeared and the homes of his wife, mother, and mother-in-law were seized by the government. In 1922, organized groups of people in New York beat pedestrians who forgot to change their hats after the end of summer, as fashion rules demanded. In 1979, 2 families, the Wetzels and the Strzelecki's, escaped from East Germany in a homemade hot air balloon. The feat was the result of more than a year and a half of preparation that included 3 different balloons, several modifications, and 1 failed first attempt. In 2009, 9 women were rescued from what they believed was a house for the reality television show Big Brother, but it turned out to be a criminal organization. Gerber, the baby food manufacturer, once tried to launch a similar jarred food product aimed at college students and young adults called Gerber Singles. It was a major failure, despite including entrees such as beef burgundy and Mediterranean-style vegetables. There is an Australian senator named Bill Heffernan who, in 2014, felt that the new security measures at Parliament were inadequate. To protest this, he smuggled in a fake pipe bomb and presented it at a Senate hearing as proof that the building was no longer secure. When Ben Stiller decided to play the lead role himself in Tropic Thunder, Tom Cruise called him to say that he could not get the script out of his head and asked what other role was available. Stiller suggested the studio executive Les Grossman, a role that Cruise himself helped conceptualize and agreed to play. To keep up with Robin Williams' improvisation in Mrs. Doubtfire, director Chris Columbus had to shoot the entire movie with additional cameras to capture the reactions of the other actors. 1,968,500 feet of film were used. Columbus has 972 boxes filled with outtakes. Modern windows are made with float glass, a sheet of glass produced by floating molten glass on a bed of low melting point molten metal, typically tin. This method was developed in the 1950s by Sir Alistair Pilkington and Kenneth Bickerstaff. There is a muscle called the tensor tympani inside the middle ear that some people can voluntarily contract to produce a rumbling noise that only they can hear. This tiny muscle is attached to one of the small bones of the ear and normally plays a role in the response to sounds produced by the body itself, such as chewing. People who can voluntarily control it describe a deep sound similar to distant thunder. The ability is not universal, and some people can maintain the rumbling for several seconds. Election day in the United States was set on a Tuesday so farmers could travel to the polls and still have enough time to bring their crops to market. In 2017, a Scottish widower launched 2,000 messages in bottles in an attempt to find love. He got 50 potential dates and multiple scornful responses from locals and environmental agencies. German film director Werner Herzog made a short film in 1964 called Game in the Sand that he refuses to release because the filming got out of control. The plot revolves around 4 children and a rooster in a cardboard box and includes a scene in which the chicken is buried in sand up to its neck. For decades, radiation therapy patients had reported phenomena such as flashes of bright or blue light while receiving radiation for brain cancer. Researchers confirmed in 2019 that this was Cherenkov light generated in the fluids of the eye. That year, they managed to directly capture the phenomenon during treatments using a specially sensitive camera system. Radiation can produce a faint glow when charged particles travel through certain materials at speeds greater than the speed of light in that material. The effect is also responsible for the characteristic blue glow observed in some nuclear reactors. The Malleus Maleficarum was a 15th century book containing detailed instructions on how to identify whether a person was a witch. First published in 1487 and primarily associated with Inquisitor Heinrich Kramer, it also described procedures for interrogations and legal proceedings related to accusations of witchcraft. The printing press allowed it to circulate widely throughout Europe, and numerous editions appeared over the following centuries. Although it was never a universal official manual of the Church, it became one of the most influential and notorious texts associated with the persecution of alleged witches. In 1691, a Swedish farmhand named Sven Andersson was executed for having relations with a mountain nymph. During the Parade of Nations at the Olympic Games opening ceremony, Greece always enters the stadium first because of its status as the birthplace of the Olympics. In the 1950s, future stunt performer Evel Knievel operated heavy machinery at a copper mine in Montana. He was fired after making the vehicle perform a 2-wheel maneuver and accidentally crashing into a power line, cutting off electricity to the entire town. Jaws 3 was planned as a parody about the studio trying to make Jaws sequels, titled Jaws 3: People Zero. It was canceled when Spielberg objected to the idea. Residential lawns in the United States use up to 9 billion gallons of water every day. Much of that consumption occurs during the warmer months, when millions of households water gardens and green spaces to maintain their lawns. In the drier regions of the country, outdoor irrigation can account for a considerable share of household water use. For this reason, some cities offer incentives to replace traditional lawns with native plants and gardens adapted to drought conditions. In 2021, a single sandwich shop in New Jersey that was publicly traded managed to reach a market capitalization of more than $100 million, despite generating only $35,000 in revenue over 2 years. The business's largest shareholder was the wrestling coach at the neighboring high school. Virtually all the dialogue in the 1984 movie This Is Spinal Tap was improvised. The actors were only given outlines indicating where the scenes would begin and end, but everything else came from them. Whenever possible, the first take was used in the movie to capture natural reactions. There are depictions of knights fighting snails drawn in the margins of medieval manuscripts from the late 13th century, including songbooks, prayer books, and even formal letters. They include man-sized snails, snails floating in the air, and human-snail hybrids ridden by rabbits, and their origins remain a mystery. During World War II, when penicillin production could not meet demand, doctors collected the urine of treated patients, extracted the penicillin, and administered it to other patients. Audie Murphy, the most decorated American soldier of World War II, faced a German company alone for an hour and then led a successful counterattack despite being wounded and out of ammunition. In Hamelin, Germany, there is a place called Bungelosenstrasse, which means street without drums. According to legend, it was the last place where the children from the story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin were seen. Since then, music and dancing have not been allowed on that street. With a population of 170 million people, Bangladesh is the most populous country that has never won an Olympic medal. The country has participated in the Summer Games since 1984 and has competed in disciplines such as athletics, swimming, archery, and shooting. One of its greatest achievements came when archer Ruman Shana earned direct qualification for Tokyo, something unprecedented for a Bangladeshi athlete. Coast redwoods can absorb 250 metric tons of carbon over their 25-year life cycle. The largest, the General Sherman tree, has sequestered 392 metric tons of carbon and is still growing. Cats display the same major attachment styles as babies and dogs. In experiments in which they were briefly separated from their caregivers and later reunited with them, many cats showed secure attachment, seeking contact and quickly becoming calm again. Others displayed insecure attachment patterns. Researchers at Oregon State University also found that these patterns can remain relatively stable even after socialization training, suggesting that the bond between cats and humans may be more complex than is commonly imagined. The school bus in Point Roberts, Washington, has to cross through Canada twice a day to take children to and from school. The students make a 40-minute trip that takes them out of the United States into British Columbia, Canada, and then back into the United States through Blaine, Washington. When Einstein and his wife divorced, his son Hans Albert held a grudge against his father when he told him at the age of 15 that he wanted to become an engineer, which angered Einstein. In Japan, there is a style called nagashi somen, in which restaurants have channels of running water where noodles slide by and diners have to catch them. Traditionally, long-sloped bamboo channels are used while participants wait with their chopsticks to grab the somen before they pass by. It is an especially popular custom during the summer because the noodles are served cold. Some establishments even build winding, multi-level courses to turn the meal into a more entertaining experience. A Polish Olympic javelin thrower named Maria Andrzejczyk sold her silver medal to fund a child's surgery. The buyer allowed her to keep it. Andrzejczyk had won the medal at the Tokyo Olympic Games and, shortly afterward, auctioned it to help pay for the heart treatment of a Polish baby named Miłosz. The Żabka supermarket chain won the auction for an amount equivalent to more than $100,000, but decided to return the medal to her in recognition of her gesture. After Shemp Howard of the Three Stooges died in 1955, Moe Howard offered the position of the new third stooge to African-American comedian Manton Moreland, but Columbia Pictures demanded an actor who was already under contract with the studio, with Joe Besser being one of the few comedians available. There was a point during the 1990s when Ty's Beanie Babies accounted for 10% of all sales on eBay. Honeybees are so obsessed with cleanliness that most leave the hive when they know it is time to die in order to avoid contaminating the young and the food stores. The colony also has worker bees that quickly remove bodies left inside and carry them far from the entrance. In addition, some bees can detect sick larvae inside cells and remove them before an infection spreads. This collective behavior, known as social hygiene, helps protect colonies where tens of thousands of individuals may live together. A pregnancy requires around 50,000 calories, the equivalent of about 199 Snickers chocolate bars containing 250 calories each, which is actually a surprisingly low number of calories. This estimate refers to the additional energy required throughout the entire pregnancy, not the mother's total energy consumption. The requirements are not distributed evenly either. They usually increase especially during the second and third trimesters, when the growth of the baby and maternal tissues accelerates. Conservation-induced extinction is when attempts to save a critically endangered species directly cause the extinction of another. This risk can arise when predators, competitors, or introduced species are removed from an ecosystem without anticipating all the consequences. It is especially delicate on small islands, where just a few species may depend on one another in unexpected ways. For this reason, some modern programs study the entire ecological network before intervening. In ancient Sparta, after the wedding, brides shaved their hair and dressed in men's clothing to appear less threatening to the groom on the wedding night. The ritual was described centuries later by Plutarch, who wrote that the bride waited for her husband in a dark room after changing her appearance. Spartan marriages could also begin with discreet encounters, since young warriors continued living and eating with their military companions even after getting married. People can generally guess whether someone is wealthy or not by evaluating their face with 68% accuracy. In a study conducted by researchers at the University of Toronto, participants looked at photographs of faces with neutral expressions and were able to identify the subject's socioeconomic status at a rate above chance. Interestingly, when the faces showed emotions, their ability decreased. The researchers suggested that certain habitual expressions may leave subtle signals over time, although these impressions are far from infallible. A single company owns Louis Vuitton, Tiffany, Dior, Fendi, Givenchy, Marc Jacobs, Stella McCartney, Sephora, and Princess Yachts. The glass mine 43 was an anti-personnel mine with a glass body used by the Germans during World War II. It was designed with the minimum amount of metal to reduce the likelihood of detection. Landing gear stowaways are people who hide in the wheel compartments of airplanes. Between 1947 and 2015, the United States Federal Aviation Administration recorded 113 such attempts, with a mortality rate of 76%. It is estimated that 400,000 children were fathered in Germany during World War II by occupying forces from the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. The earliest writings mentioning yogurt are attributed to Pliny the Elder, the Roman author, philosopher, and military commander from the early Roman Empire. He noted that certain barbarian nations knew how to thicken milk into a substance with a pleasant acidity. The European Union is currently working on a digital product passport so consumers can track where a product comes from, what it is made of, how to repair it, and how to dispose of it. This includes clothing, chemicals, and electronics. Actor John LaRoquette was the uncredited narrator of the prologue to the 1974 horror movie The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Instead of cash, director Tobe Hooper paid him with marijuana. In a fit of rage, Roman Emperor Hadrian stabbed a slave in the eye with a stylus. Regretting his action, he called the slave and told him to ask for virtually anything as compensation, to which the slave replied that he only wanted his eye back. A 44-year-old man in France was discovered to be missing, without knowing it, 90% of his brain, and yet he was living a normal life. The case became known after he went to the hospital because of weakness in one leg, and doctors discovered a massive buildup of fluid that had compressed his brain tissue for decades. He was married, had 2 children, and worked as a civil servant. The case was published in the medical journal The Lancet and became an extraordinary example of the brain's ability to adapt to slow and prolonged changes. Michael Jackson only agreed to perform 10 concerts for his This Is It series of shows, but his representatives increased the number to 50. His father, Joe Jackson, expressed concern from the beginning that the promoters were pushing Michael too hard. Although Romeo and Juliet are fictional characters and there is no evidence that Shakespeare ever visited Italy, the city of Verona has a house that claims to have been Juliet's home. Its balcony was only added to the building after 1905. Colombia produces 80% of the roses sold in the United States, along with many other varieties of flowers for export. The country is the world's second largest flower exporter, and the industry employs around 130,000 people, making it the leading source of employment for women in Colombia. The lead singer of the Village People was actually straight. In fact, he was married to Felicia Rashad, the actress who played Claire Huxtable on The Cosby Show. Marine Corps Captain John W. Ripley received the Navy Cross in Vietnam for repeatedly climbing beneath a bridge while under enemy fire to place a total of 500 pounds of explosives in order to destroy it and separate his men from the enemy. He survived the action and retired as a colonel in 1992. The power to punish pirates is explicitly mentioned in the United States Constitution. Article 1 grants Congress the authority to define and punish piracy and felonies committed on the high seas, as well as offenses against the law of nations. The provision was especially important when maritime trade was vital to the young country, and attacks at sea posed a considerable threat. Soon afterward, the United States would also participate in the Barbary Wars against North African states linked to attacks and the capture of ships. The vast majority of Australia's naval fleet is docked at 2 different military facilities located more than 2,400 miles apart. By pure coincidence, both facilities are called Garden Island. A stunt performer on the set of Transformers 3 suffered brain damage after being struck by a piece of metal. Following the accident, part of her skull was removed, and she now suffers from memory loss, seizures, and blindness in one eye. She was awarded $18.5 million in a legal settlement. The Harlem Globetrotters once lost control of the score in a game and found themselves 12 points behind with 2 minutes remaining, forcing them to play conventional basketball. They rallied, but failed to come back, and when the final buzzer sounded, the crowd was stunned and disappointed. Medical residents in South Korea are often required to work up to 88 hours per week, and many report working nearly 100 hours. The 5 stages of grief do not always occur in an exact order from denial and anger to acceptance, and they often vary from person to person. The psychiatrist who created the models stated that she regretted describing them in a way that was widely misunderstood. The winner of the 1927 Alaska Territory Flag Design Contest was a 7th-grade orphan named Benny Benson. He was awarded a watch bearing the flag emblem and $1,000 for his education, which he used to study diesel mechanics. The only scientific paper ever published by Bill Gates was a possible solution to a mathematical problem involving pancake flipping. He wrote it with Professor Christos Papadimitriou, and it was published in 1979. The problem involves sorting a stack of pancakes of different sizes using only flips from the top of the stack. Their work presented an algorithm that, for decades, maintained one of the best-known bounds for solving the problem. Gates had begun working on it while studying at Harvard, before dropping out of college to focus on Microsoft. During the siege of Leningrad in World War II, the scientists guarding the world's largest seed collection protected the specimens from the cold, rats, the starving population, and their own hunger. 28 botanists died during the siege while defending the collection. Europa has the smoothest surface of any known solid object in our solar system. The apparent youth and smoothness of its surface are due to the ocean of water beneath the crust, which could possibly harbor extraterrestrial life, although it would most likely consist of single-celled organisms and bacteria-like creatures. In 1928, at the age of 20, future President Lyndon Johnson got a job teaching at an elementary school for underprivileged Mexican-American students. Within 3 months, he developed spelling, public speaking, and athletic training programs. In 2017, NASA proposed that a magnetic shield positioned between the Sun and Mars could protect the Martian atmosphere from being stripped away by solar winds. Aurora Rodriguez Carballera tried to create an ideal human being through her daughter, Hildegard. Hildegard was reading at the age of 2, spoke 4 languages by the age of 8, and entered law school at 13, becoming a professor there at 18. Stendhal syndrome is a psychosomatic condition that causes a rapid heartbeat, dizziness, confusion, and even hallucinations when an individual is exposed to works of art or objects of great beauty. For the first time in nearly 300 years, Europe currently has no reigning female sovereign on the throne. This situation arose after Queen Margrethe II of Denmark abdicated in 2024, when her son, Frederick X, became king. For decades, Europe had several reigning queens at the same time, including Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom, Beatrix of the Netherlands, and Margrethe II. However, this absence is likely to be temporary. Several European monarchies have crown princesses expected to become queens, including Victoria of Sweden, Leonor of Spain, Elizabeth of Belgium, and Katharina Amalia of the Netherlands. Mauro Valenzuela, the worker who loaded hazardous materials onto ValueJet Flight 592, causing a fire and subsequent crash in 1996, is still wanted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and a $10,000 reward is being offered for his capture. The pirate accent comes from a single actor. Robert Newton exaggerated his natural Cornish accent when he played Blackbeard and Long John Silver in several movies during the 1950s. In 2006, a woman named Edith Macefield rejected an offer of $1 million to sell her 108-year-old house to make way for a commercial development in Seattle. Instead, the 5-story project was built around her home. Some electric vehicles add a slow creeping function, so that the cars feel more comfortable and familiar to consumers. Alanis Morissette was dropped by her record company after the poor sales of her first 2 albums. Her 3rd album, Jagged Little Pill, became the 13th best-selling album of all time worldwide. Victoria Coren Mitchell, a British writer, television presenter, and professional poker player, had a therapist who was treating her for her intense fear of flying and who died in a plane crash. In the early 20th century, unaccompanied women protected themselves from casual assaults by men using a clothing accessory, the hat pin. It was so effective as a weapon that many states passed laws limiting its length. The person with the most divorces from monogamous marriages was a Baptist pastor. He married 31 times, and only 5 of the marriages ended with the death of a spouse. Britain used around 22,000 military personnel as test subjects in its nuclear bomb trials during the 1950s and 1960s, and it also tested chemical weapons on service members until 1989. The Pan-Athenaic Stadium, built in 330 before Christ, is the only stadium made entirely of marble. It was excavated and used in the 1896 Olympic Games and is still used for events today. Its attendance record of 80,000 people was set at a basketball game in 1968. One of the oldest surviving depictions of Jesus is graffiti from the year 200 after Christ that mocks a man worshiping a figure on a cross with the head of a donkey. North Korea removed references to communism from its constitution in 2009. Tom Dwan won the largest televised poker pot in history, worth $3.1 million, by calling with a pair of queens against an ace-high bluff from Wesley Fay. In Britain during World War I, it was illegal to buy someone a drink at a bar. The Bloody Mary cocktail was invented in Paris and was originally called the Bucket of Blood, then the Red Snapper. Its creation is usually credited to bartender Fernand Petiot, who worked at the famous Harry's New York bar in Paris during the 1920s. The original mixture was much simpler than today's version and mainly combined vodka with tomato juice. Over the years, ingredients such as Worcestershire sauce, lemon, pepper, and other seasonings were added, giving rise to numerous variations around the world. Al Martino, who played Johnny Fontaine in The Godfather, got the role with the help and pressure of his real-life godfather, organized crime boss Russell Bufalino. Prescription drug advertisements were banned from American television until the Food and Drug Administration eased restrictions in 1997. Gibraltar forgot that it was a city for 180 years. In 2022, it applied for city status and lost the bid, but became a city anyway after researchers discovered that Queen Victoria had granted it that status 180 years earlier. The Guinness World Record for the largest gallstone ever recorded is 13.2 pounds. We will probably never discover many highly specialized dinosaur species because they lived in environments where they could not be preserved due to erosion, such as mountains. The fossil record favors places where remains could be quickly buried by sediment, such as floodplains, deltas, and ancient riverbeds. Mountain environments, on the other hand, tend to lose material through erosion before it can fossilize. This means that entire communities of dinosaurs adapted to high altitudes may have existed without leaving recognizable fossils, creating major gaps in what we know about their diversity. The rise of mathematics during the 17th and 18th centuries in the Western world was linked to the development of artillery and the growing need for military professionals to have strong mathematical skills. Indian wrestler Yogeshwar Dutt refused an upgrade to an Olympic silver medal after the original medalist posthumously tested positive for doping. He did so because he wanted the deceased athlete's family to keep the medal out of respect. Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI were married by proxy. Marie's own brother represented the groom during the ceremony, and she did not meet her husband for the first time until a month after the wedding. Magikarp is based on a folk tale about a carp that swims upstream and, if it manages to pass through the Dragon Gate, turns into a dragon. It is meant to be a symbol of passing the imperial examinations. Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of the band Queen, left his London property to his former girlfriend, who put it up for sale for $38 million. After Claude Monet underwent cataract surgery, he could see ultraviolet light, which made everything appear bluer and more vibrant in his paintings. The United States Air Force once built a supercomputer made entirely from 1,760 PlayStation 3 consoles. A video game was once designed in which you played as Jack the Ripper and eliminated women of the night, except that in this game, the women were actually vampires in disguise, turning Jack the Ripper into the hero of the game. As expected, the game was later canceled. Until the middle of the 20th century, cats responsible for rodent control aboard ships were issued passports signed with their own paw prints. These documents could record the animal's name, physical description, the ship it belonged to, and its travels between ports. Cats were useful members of many crews because they protected provisions and helped keep rats and mice under control. Some even became true maritime celebrities, with photographs, stories, and records of the many countries they had visited. There is a fungus that absorbs radiation and is feeding on the Chernobyl nuclear power plant right now. Melanin-rich fungi capable of thriving under radiation levels that would be harmful to many other organisms have been found in highly radioactive areas of the complex. Later experiments suggest that ionizing radiation may promote certain metabolic processes in some of these fungi, a phenomenon known as radiotrophy. Melanized fungi have even been sent into space to study their possible usefulness as protection against radiation. According to the United States Census Bureau, fewer than 5% of people who hold a general educational development credential will earn a college degree. 77% of students with this credential do not continue beyond their first semester of college. During a council held between 1414 and 1418, Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund made a grammatical mistake in Latin by treating the word schism as feminine. When a cardinal corrected him, he replied that he was the king of the Romans and was above grammar. Historians nicknamed him Super Grammaticum. Mary Kay Bergman was the official voice of Disney's Snow White from 1989 until 1999, and the main female voice actress on South Park from its premiere in 1997. The states of Michigan and Ohio faced each other in a territorial conflict during the 1830s over the strip of land containing the city of Toledo. There is a regular Barbie called the Lamely doll, where the doll has brown hair, cellulite, stretch marks, freckles, acne, and more. It was also given the proportions of a typical 19-year-old young woman. It was created as a more realistic alternative to traditional dolls based on body averages obtained from studies of teenagers. Additionally, it included accessories like imperfection stickers to reflect natural changes in the skin and promote a healthier body image. Barbara in Latin means strange woman. The word comes from the Greek term barbaros, which was used to describe people who did not speak Greek and whose language sounded incomprehensible to them. Over time, the name Barbara became popular as a female given name in many European cultures. According to neuroscientist Glenn Jeffrey, who studies vision at University College London, the eye color of reindeer changes depending on the time of year. In the summer, they actually turn golden, reflecting more light through the retina, which helps them cope with the nearly continuous daylight of the Arctic summer. In the winter, however, they turn a deep blue to help them cope with the almost continuous darkness of winter. This is Missy, the most valuable cow in the world. She produces 50% more milk than an average cow and has superior genetics. Her value is $1.2 million, and her embryos are in high demand. Vincent van Gogh sold only one painting during his lifetime, The Red Vineyard. The painting is currently in the Pushkin Museum in Russia. It was purchased at an exhibition in Brussels in 1890 by the artist Anna Buch. After his death, his works began to gain recognition, and today they are among the most valuable in modern art. The opossum is the only marsupial in North America. It is known for its ability to play dead as a defense mechanism, entering an involuntary state that can last several minutes. In addition, it has notable resistance to venoms such as those from some snakes and helps control pests by feeding on insects, small rodents, and ticks, making it a beneficial animal for its environment. Samuel Morse was originally an artist, but he abandoned his career to develop a way to communicate over long distances after his wife fell ill and died while he was away on an artistic assignment. This event deeply motivated him, as he received the news too late due to the slow communications of the time. From then on, he dedicated himself to perfecting the telegraph and the code that now bears his name, revolutionizing the way people communicated across long distances. In the Netherlands, 8 prisons were closed because of a lack of criminals. We can send them some, do not worry. The decline in crime, together with reforms in the justice system, caused several prisons to become practically empty. Some of these facilities have even been used to house prisoners from other European countries. The web of the golden silk orb weaver spider is so strong that it can capture a bird, and then the spider eats it. Its silk combines strength and elasticity, being stronger than steel of the same thickness, which allows it to absorb impacts without breaking. Although it is rare, cases of small birds being trapped in these webs have been documented, especially in tropical regions where these spiders build large and dense webs. Benjamin Franklin designed the first official penny of the United States and called it Fugio. Instead of the usual "In God We Trust" written on the coin, it said "Mind Your Business." The coin also included a sun and a sundial with the Latin phrase "Fugio," which means "I fly" or "time flies," along with the message "Mind Your Business," interpreted as a call both to mind your own affairs and to be diligent in your work. Mexico City is the city with the most museums in the world, more than 160, and most are free on Sundays. Among them are some of the most important in Latin America, such as the National Museum of Anthropology and the Palace of Fine Arts. The tradition of free Sunday admission aims to encourage visits from students and families. Some insects smell with their genitals. In species such as certain moths, chemical receptors are located in structures near their reproductive organs, which allows them to detect pheromones with great precision during mating. This ability is so sensitive that they can perceive traces at long distances, even at minimal concentrations, which increases their chances of finding a mate in environments where encounters are infrequent. Although it is called football in the United Kingdom, the term soccer actually originated in Britain in the late 1800s, not in America. The word comes from association football, which was abbreviated as ASOS and later evolved into soccer as university slang. Over time, in countries like the United States, that term remained to distinguish it from other types of football, while in the United Kingdom it fell out of use. William Herschel, the discoverer of Uranus, lived to the age of 84, the same number of years it takes Uranus to complete its orbit around the Sun. Herschel discovered the planet in 1781 using a telescope he had built himself, expanding the number of known planets for the first time since antiquity. The coconut crab grows more than 3 feet long and is not only the largest land crab, but also the largest arthropod, the group that includes insects, spiders, and crustaceans. It can lift surprisingly heavy objects with its claws and climb trees to feed, including coconuts that it opens with great force. It has a highly developed sense of smell, similar to that of insects, and can live for several decades on islands in the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Robert De Niro was considered one of the most extreme method actors in Hollywood because he actually learned to box in Raging Bull and spent time driving a taxi for his role in Taxi Driver. He also gained a significant amount of weight to portray different stages of his character in the film, showing an uncommon level of commitment. This intensive approach to his roles established him as one of the most respected actors of his generation. The first athlete disqualified from the Olympic Games for using banned substances was Hans Gunnar Liljenvall of Sweden in 1968. In Mexico, he had drunk 2 beers to calm his nerves before starting the shooting competition. In the year 1890, inventor Ludwig Eitler invented an alarm mechanism that was built into a bed. When you set the alarm for a specific time, the bed would raise to a 45-degree angle and throw you out of it. It was not successful. The walled city of Saint-Malo, France, is famous for being a safe haven for pirates. Located on the coast of Brittany, this fortified city protected privateers authorized by the French crown, who attacked enemy ships and shared the loot with the king. Its strategic position and walls made it an important maritime and commercial center for several centuries. According to astronauts, moon dust smells like gunpowder. Although in space there is no air to perceive smells, astronauts noticed the scent when they returned to the lunar module after walking on the surface. The dust stuck to their suits and, once inside the cabin, released a smell similar to burned gunpowder or hot metal. In 1980, Detroit gave Saddam Hussein the key to the city. The recognition was related to a donation made to a local church and to the ties of the Arab community in the area during that period. Arch West, the inventor of Doritos, was buried with Doritos sprinkled over his body. Arch West's family decided to honor him that way as a nod to his legacy in the snack industry. During the funeral, some of his favorite products were even placed directly into the urn. The first person with the mutation for blue eyes had brown eyes and probably never saw anyone with blue eyes, since it takes 2 people with that mutation for someone to be born with that distinctive eye color. Albert Einstein actually had an illegitimate daughter who was born in 1902. It is believed that her name was Liesel, and that she was the result of his relationship with Mileva Maric before they married. Her existence became known through personal letters discovered years later, although her fate remains a mystery, as there are no clear records of her later life, and some historians suggest that she may have died in infancy or been given up for adoption. In the 1970s, Senator Larry Pressler refused to accept a bribe offered to him by the FBI. He was called a hero for doing so, but he did not believe that rejecting a bribe should be considered heroic. Good point, Senator. The shortest war ever recorded was between Great Britain and Zanzibar on August 27, 1896. Zanzibar surrendered after only 38 minutes. The conflict began when a new sultan took power without British approval. The empire's fleet bombarded the royal palace, and the resistance ended almost immediately. The mantis shrimp can strike with a speed equal to that of a bullet, 50 times faster than a blink. In fact, a strike from a mantis shrimp can easily break the shell of a crab or a mollusk. This attack also generates a small cavitation bubble that collapses and produces a flash of light and momentary heat, amplifying the impact. Thanks to this ability, it is one of the most effective predators in the ocean and can even crack aquarium glass if it feels threatened. The Gippsland Lakes in Victoria, Australia actually glow in the dark. The light is created by a chemical reaction called bioluminescence when natural microorganisms in the water are disturbed. Just do not drink it because you will get sick. Bright, but sick. The core of the sun is so hot that a piece of sun core the size of a pinhead would be enough to kill a person standing about 100 miles away. At the center of the sun, temperatures exceed 15 million degrees. At that extreme temperature, matter exists in a plasma state and releases an enormous amount of energy. It is possible that cats and dogs are allergic to human dander. Dander is made up of tiny cells that shed from hair or skin, and although it is commonly associated with pets, humans also produce it. In some cases, these particles can trigger reactions in sensitive animals such as itching, redness, or sneezing, since their immune system responds to proteins present in human skin in a similar way to other environmental allergies. The world record for the most passengers carried on a commercial airplane was set on May 24, 1991, when more than 1,000 Ethiopian Jews were evacuated to Israel. The flight began with 1,086 people on the plane, but ended with 1,088 because 2 of them gave birth on the way to Israel. In an intelligence test, an incentive of $10 caused the average results to increase by 20 IQ points. The experiment showed that motivation can greatly influence performance on these tests. When participants knew they could receive a financial reward, they tended to try harder and solve more problems correctly. India's successful mission to Mars cost less than the production of a Hollywood movie. The mission cost £99 million, while the movie Gravity, starring George Clooney and Sandra Bullock, cost £128 million. 12% of all Coca-Cola in the world is consumed at breakfast. Very healthy. In many countries, the drink is consumed in the morning as a companion to food or even as a substitute for coffee. The enormous global consumption of the brand means that even small daily habits represent gigantic quantities of bottles. A 63-year-old Tasmanian woman gave birth to her first baby in August 2016, becoming the oldest first-time mother in Australia. Elvis Presley only failed one class while he was in high school, music class. According to the story, his teacher believed he had no talent because he did not follow the traditional techniques taught in class. Despite this, he continued developing his style on his own, influenced by gospel and blues, which later led him to become one of the most influential figures in modern music. Rhinoceroses communicate using their droppings. Do not ask how. In reality, they create piles of dung called middens that they use as signaling points. The smell transmits information about territory, reproductive status, and the identity of the individual, allowing other rhinos to know who passed by even days later. There is something called elimination communication, where instead of using diapers, parents learn to use timing, signals, and cues to know when their baby needs to go to the bathroom. This practice is common in several cultures and can begin from the first months of life, helping reduce diaper use and strengthen the connection between the caregiver and the baby. Over time, some children develop greater body awareness and gain control of their elimination habits earlier. In Canada, there is a candy called maple taffy that is made by pouring melted maple syrup onto clean snow, so that the cold of the snow quickly thickens the syrup to create a soft candy. Amazing! There is a town called OK in Oklahoma, United States. On maps, it reads, OK, OK. The small town is located near the Arkansas River and has a small population. Its curious name often draws attention because it looks more like a confirmation written on the map than the name of a place. In 1965, 16-year-old high school student Randy Gardner stayed awake for 11 days and 24 minutes. That is 265 consecutive hours. He holds the record for a human staying awake intentionally without the use of stimulants. Patrick Stewart began losing his hair when he was only 18 years old and started to believe that no woman would ever be interested in him again. Now, he is happily married to his third wife. Over time, he embraced his appearance and made it part of his identity, which even influenced his stage presence and iconic roles. His career in theater and film shows how confidence and talent can overcome personal insecurities. When he died in 1891, John Davy was the only person who spoke Cornish. He had kept the language alive because he spoke it to his cat. Cornish was a Celtic language spoken in Cornwall in the southwest of England and had been disappearing for centuries due to the dominance of English. At the beginning of the 20th century, a revitalization movement began that allowed the language to have speakers again and programs to teach it. Argyria is a condition that turns a person's skin a bright blue color. It is caused by chronic exposure to silver. A man from California named Paul Carrison developed this after using a special silver-based preparation to treat a skin condition and drinking colloidal silver, a product that consists of silver particles suspended in liquid. By paying attention and actively noticing more things, we can train our brain to seemingly slow down time. This is because when memories are more detailed, moments appear to last longer and the brain takes more time to register information, making time seem to pass more slowly. Salvador Dali was extremely afraid of grasshoppers for some reason. The artist himself said that the fear began in his childhood after some children threw one in his face. The phobia was so intense that he even avoided illustrations or images of the insect, and in some of his surrealist works, disturbing representations of them appear. Brazilian police on the island of Marajo ride water buffalo when they patrol, instead of horses. These animals adapt better to flooded, muddy terrain and to the frequent rains of the region, where horses would have more difficulty moving. In addition, buffalo are strong, can travel long distances with loads, and are common in the area, which makes them a practical and efficient option for daily duties. There are thousands of rogue planets in our universe, and it is entirely plausible that any number of these planets could harbor life. These worlds, which do not orbit any star, could retain internal heat thanks to geological activity or thick atmospheres that trap energy. Some scientists suggest that beneath the surface, there could be liquid oceans protected from extreme cold, opening the possibility of life forms adapted to conditions very different from those on Earth. The owner of the domain Windows2000.com was named Bob, and Microsoft happens to own Bob.com. They reached an agreement to exchange the web addresses. The site Windows 2000 was owned by a designer named Bob Kirstein, and when Microsoft launched its operating system, Windows 2000, they negotiated the domain exchange to avoid legal conflicts. Most Bolivian families have a dried llama fetus under the foundations of their homes for good luck. They are most commonly found in Bolivia's witches' market, where you can also find toad talismans, owl feathers, and stone amulets. Within the United Kingdom, accents change noticeably approximately every 25 miles. This variation is due to centuries of regional isolation, historical influences, and social differences that shaped pronunciation and vocabulary. Even within the same city, there can be distinct nuances, making the United Kingdom one of the places with the greatest diversity of accents in the English-speaking world. Cat originally meant dog. The word comes from the Latin catulus, which means small dog or puppy. Over time, the term evolved in different Romance languages until it became associated with domestic felines. Related words such as kitten in English or gatto in Italian also have roots linked to that ancient term. Most meteors are actually the size of a grain of sand and disintegrate in the air. The larger ones that actually reach the Earth are called meteorites and are very rare. As they enter the atmosphere at high speed, they produce the glow known as a shooting star, caused by friction with the air. Every day, thousands of these particles enter, although almost all of them burn up before touching the ground. The amount of money that the United States spends on its military is almost the same as that of the rest of the world combined. Of the 8,400 attack helicopters in the world, the United States owns 6,400, and the United States has 10 aircraft carriers, the same as the rest of the world combined. In the oceans, there are giant bioluminescent creatures similar to worms. They are believed to be able to reach the size of a blue whale. In many cases, they are colonies of organisms called siphonophores, which are actually made up of thousands of individuals that function as a single organism. Some have been observed glowing in the darkness of the ocean and reaching extraordinary lengths. The Parliament of Iceland is the oldest still active parliament in the world. It was founded in the year 930. Political meetings typically lasted 2 weeks in June, which was a period of uninterrupted daylight and good weather. The very first e-commerce transaction was a drug deal in the early 1970s, when Stanford students used ARPANET, the first version of the internet, to buy marijuana from students at MIT. Rats can compress themselves to enter a hole only about 3/4 of an inch wide, making it almost impossible to have a building completely free of rats. Their skeleton is very flexible, and if their head can pass through an opening, the rest of the body can almost always pass through as well. They also have very strong incisors, capable of gnawing through wood, plastic, and even some metals. In 1881, dentist Alfred Southwick had the idea for the electric chair after witnessing a strange accident in which an intoxicated man died after accidentally touching the terminal of a live generator. Southwick thought that electricity could offer a faster method of execution and collaborated with engineers and politicians to develop it, which led to its adoption in the state of New York in the late 19th century. The founder of Victoria's Secret, Roy Raymond, sold the company in 1982 for $4 million. But by the early 1990s, it was worth $1 billion. After the sale, the company was acquired by the Limited, which boosted its growth through a more aggressive marketing strategy and store expansion. Over time, it became one of the most recognized lingerie brands worldwide. When a coal mine catches fire, it can burn for years. There are thousands of these fires happening right now. Some can continue for decades underground because the coal keeps feeding the fire slowly. These fires release polluting gases and are very difficult to extinguish due to the depth and extent of the tunnels. In Peru, fried or roasted guinea pig is considered a delicacy known as cuy. It has been a staple in the diet of Peru for about 5,000 years. Since pre-Incan times, it has been raised in rural households due to its easy maintenance and nutritional value, and today it remains a traditional dish present in festivities and celebrations in various regions of the country. There are a total of 15 countries that have absolutely no military force, including Costa Rica, Liechtenstein, and Samoa. In many of these cases, national security is managed through international agreements or internal police forces rather than traditional armies. For example, some rely on allied countries for defense, while others have adopted historical positions of neutrality or demilitarization to focus their resources on education, healthcare, and social development. The Maya used to launch nests of killer wasps at their enemies with catapults during war. It was a primitive form of biological weapon. Warriors collected nests of very aggressive wasps or bees and hurled them toward rival troops during battles. The chaos caused by the enraged insects could disorganize the enemy and make an attack easier. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, on average, people who smoke die 10 years earlier than non-smokers. For every person who dies as a result of smoking, at least 30 people live with a serious illness related to the habit of smoking. In the Piedmont region, there is a massive pink stuffed bunny about 200 feet long, created by the art collective Gelatin. The installation was designed so that hikers could interact with it at the top of the hill, and although it was originally expected to decompose over time, visible remains of this curious artwork can still be found. The largest frog in the world is larger than the smallest antelope in the world. The African Goliath frog can measure more than 11 inches and weigh more than approximately 6.5 pounds. The smallest antelope is the dik-dik, which, although taller, weighs only a few kilograms, making the two animals surprisingly comparable in size. The mother and the first wife of Theodore Roosevelt both died on Valentine's Day in 1884. His mother died of typhoid fever, and 12 hours later, his wife died of Bright's disease and complications from giving birth to the couple's first child 2 days earlier. Property owners in New York City can request that trees be planted on their street for free. They are even allowed to suggest which species to plant. This program is managed by the city's Parks Department, which evaluates the available space and soil conditions before approving the request. Additionally, residents can participate in caring for the trees, which helps improve air quality, reduce urban heat, and beautify neighborhoods. The yellow part of an egg is not the future chicken. It is food for the embryo. That part is called the yolk and contains fats, proteins, and vitamins that nourish the embryo while it develops inside the egg. The future chick forms from a small spot on the surface of the yolk called the germinal disc. At the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing, white mice were fed food 24 hours before feeding the athletes to protect them from food poisoning. If there was a problem, the food could be traced and destroyed before being served to the athletes. Toward the later years of his life, Voltaire developed the habit of living near country borders so that he could escape by crossing into another country if his writings angered authorities. That is actually pretty brilliant. Beavers have transparent eyelids so they can see underwater with their eyes closed. In reality, they possess a special membrane called the nictitating membrane that acts like a kind of third eyelid. This translucent layer protects their eyes while they swim and allows them to keep partially seeing underwater while they search for branches or build their dams. California rabbits are actually hares, not rabbits. They can reach speeds of 40 miles per hour and jump up to 10 feet into the air. Unlike rabbits, they are born with their eyes open and with full fur, which allows them to move shortly after birth. Their large ears not only improve their hearing, but also help regulate their temperature in the warm climates of the Southwest. A man named Christian Poincheval invented a range of pills designed to make people's gas smell like chocolate or roses. These capsules are made with natural ingredients like charcoal, fennel, and plant extracts, intended to help digestion and reduce unpleasant odors. The idea emerged as a curious solution to awkward social situations and has attracted attention for its unusual approach. The King of Hearts is the only king in the deck that does not have a mustache. In most traditional card designs, this character appears clean-shaven, unlike the other kings. He is also usually shown with a sword behind his head, which is why he is sometimes nicknamed the Suicide King in the English deck. In the 1990s, Saddam Hussein commissioned the creation of a version of the Quran written in a very unusual way, using his own blood as ink. Approximately 1.8 gallons of blood were extracted over a period of 2 years. Muhammad Ali once invited Billy Crystal to run with him at a local country club. Crystal accepted the invitation, but could not go because the club restricted entry to Jews. Because of that, Ali never returned to that club. In 20% of all car accidents in Sweden, deer are involved. This is because the country has a very large population of moose and deer that often cross roads, especially in forested areas. During autumn, the risk increases because it is mating season, and the animals move around more, which has led to the installation of thousands of warning signs on the roads. The richest man in Hong Kong, billionaire Li Ka-shing, yes, that is his real name, dropped out of school before turning 16. He has an estimated net worth of $20.1 billion. He started working in a plastics factory and over time founded his own business, expanding into real estate, telecommunications, and ports, building one of the most influential business empires in Asia. In 1997, 3 men from Yemen attempted to sue NASA for trespassing on their property on Mars. They claimed they had inherited the planet from their ancestors 3,000 years ago. But of course, they did not win because there is an international treaty that states that everything in the solar system, except Earth itself, belongs to everyone in the world. When Trey Parker was asked about the ending of South Park, he answered, "We have been waiting to be canceled for 18 damn years." The series premiered in 1997, and since then has been known for its provocative humor. Despite the controversies, it has become one of the longest-running animated comedies on television. Marigolds and other plants that contain the pigment xanthophyll are added to chicken feed so that the yolks of their eggs appear more orange. This pigment is deposited directly into the yolk through the diet, so its color can vary depending on what the hen eats. In many regions, consumers associate more intense yolks with higher quality, so producers adjust the feed to achieve that more attractive tone. In 2010, George Lucas committed to dedicating most of his wealth to improving education and, just 2 years later, sold Lucasfilm to Disney and donated most of the funds to a foundation focused on education. Writing was independently invented in 3 places: the Middle East, China, and Central America. All other alphabets and writing systems are derived from or inspired by these 3, or they are incomplete. In Mesopotamia, cuneiform writing appeared more than 5,000 years ago. In China, the first characters appeared during the Shang dynasty, and in Mesoamerica, civilizations such as the Maya developed complex hieroglyphic systems used to record history, rituals, and astronomy. The Aztec people often used cocoa beans as currency. With them, they could buy food, pay tribute, and even acquire slaves in certain markets. Their value was so established that there were exact measures to count them, and falsifying them by filling them with mud was punished. In addition, cocoa was not only used for trade, but also to prepare beverages reserved for the nobility and warriors. Stainless steel actually helps remove the smell of garlic and onion. This happens because the sulfur molecules responsible for the odor bind to the metal when you rub it under water, reducing their presence on the skin. That is why there are soaps made of stainless steel that are specifically used for this purpose in the kitchen, offering a simple and reusable solution to eliminate persistent odors. Because of the long-take style in the movie Birdman, Edward Norton and Michael Keaton entertained themselves by counting how many times the other actors made mistakes, forcing the scene to be repeated. Emma Stone made the most mistakes. Zach Galifianakis made the fewest, and when he did make mistakes, he sometimes improvised to avoid stopping the scene. The Maya considered slightly crossed eyes to be beautiful. Parents of babies would hang objects, such as stones, right between their children's eyes to try to make them cross-eyed. This practice was associated with aesthetic ideals and also with cultural beliefs linked to the elite, as it was thought to evoke traits of certain deities. In addition, in artistic representations and sculptures, figures with this characteristic can be observed, which suggests that it was a valued symbol within their society. In 1961, a girl named Michelle Rochon wrote a letter to President Kennedy expressing her concern about Santa Claus's safety during Soviet nuclear bomb tests near the North Pole. Incredibly, he responded by telling her that he spoke with Santa Claus and that there was nothing to worry about. Any member of the French Foreign Legion wounded while defending France can immediately apply to receive French nationality, since he would be French by spilled blood. This principle is known as French by spilled blood and has been part of the Legion's tradition for a long time. Many foreign soldiers have obtained citizenship after being wounded in combat. Apple has managed to recover gold and other valuable materials through the recycling of devices such as iPhone, iPad, and Mac. These initiatives are part of its sustainability programs, through which important resources are reused. Gold is often used in consumer electronics because it is highly resistant to corrosion and an excellent conductor of electricity. And although silver conducts better, it deteriorates more easily. The Tucano tribe in South America has a rule where men must marry outside their linguistic group so that children can be born into a bilingual environment. This practice, known as linguistic exogamy, helps maintain cultural diversity and encourages members to learn multiple languages from a young age. In some communities, a person may become fluent in several languages, which facilitates communication among different groups within the Amazon region. A Norwegian student spent $27 on bitcoins and forgot about them. A few years later, he realized their value had risen to $886,000. The story happened around 2013, when the young man checked an old purchase made in 2009 while researching cryptocurrencies for a project. With the money, he was able to buy an apartment in Oslo and still keep some bitcoins. In the past, some Starbucks cafes in Saudi Arabia had separate areas for different groups of customers, such as single men, women, and families, in line with local social norms of that time. However, these practices have changed over time, and today, many of those restrictions have been relaxed or eliminated as part of more recent social reforms in the country. Seahorses are the only fish with a neck. Unlike most fish, their head is tilted and separated from the body by a flexible area that allows them to move it up and down. This particular shape also helps them quickly suck in small crustaceans when feeding. Austrian inventor Valentin Vodev has invented a hybrid of a skateboard and a stroller. With just the press of a button, the stroller transforms into a skateboard and can travel at a speed of up to 10 miles per hour. There is a mountain in Australia called Mount Disappointment. It was given that name because the first explorers who climbed to the top realized the view was not very good and wanted to reflect their feelings in the name. There is a Starbucks at the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, where workers undergo intense background checks before being hired. They are not allowed to put customers' names on any of the cups, and, believe it or not, it is one of the busiest Starbucks locations in the country. A study shows that soccer players run an average of 7 miles per game. This distance can vary depending on the position, as midfielders usually cover more ground than defenders or forwards. Additionally, it is not just about the total distance, but the intensity, with constant changes of pace, sprints, and pauses that require great physical endurance and cardiovascular capacity. Half of all the pepper in the world is produced in Vietnam. The country became the world's main producer thanks to its tropical climate and large areas dedicated to cultivation. Much of that production is exported to international markets, where pepper is one of the most widely used spices. In the ancient Olympic Games, women were not allowed to compete, and married women were not even allowed to be in the stands to watch. Only young and unmarried women were allowed. Fathers would bring their daughters in the hope that they would marry one of the champions. In 2008, cooks in Iran tried to break the world record for the longest sandwich, but failed when the crowd started eating it before it could be measured. The attempt took place in the city of Tehran, and the sandwich measured more than 0.93 miles long, prepared with ingredients like chicken and vegetables. The lack of crowd control made it impossible to complete the official measurement, leaving the curious event as a failed but memorable attempt. The 10 most venomous snake species in the world live in Australia. Among them are the inland taipan, considered the most venomous snake on the planet, and several extremely potent sea snakes. However, despite hosting so many dangerous species, Australia records relatively few deaths each year thanks to quick access to antivenoms and strict emergency medical systems. A group of porcupines is fittingly called a prickle. In English, the term prickle directly refers to their sharp defenses. Although they are usually solitary animals, they can sometimes gather in small groups, especially in areas with abundant food or shelter. Their quills do not shoot out, but they detach easily upon contact, which makes them a very effective defense against predators. Research shows that sleep patterns are linked to important personality and behavioral traits, and that people who stay up late tend to take more risks than those who wake up early. In a town in Germany called Fugerei, the rent has not increased since the year 1520. It can cost only $1 to live there for an entire year. Pack your bags. This small neighborhood in the city of Augsburg was founded by the Fugger family as housing for people with limited resources. Residents pay a symbolic annual rent and must follow certain community rules. Gelatin is made from collagen that is produced by boiling the bones, skin, and hides of animals such as cows and pigs. People have been consuming it since 1897, and it represents around 80% of the gelatin market. In addition to its use in food, it is also used in pharmaceutical products, such as capsules, and in the cosmetic industry. Its ability to form gels makes it useful in a wide variety of culinary and technical applications. There is something called invisible art, where the works are imagined by the artist and described to the audience. In 2011, a woman named Amy Davidson bought a piece for $10,000, saying she identified with the ideology of the non-visible art project. There is a sucker born every minute. In 1969, the brand Honeywell launched the H316, the first home computer. It cost more than $10,000. In reality, it was a simplified version of an industrial mini-computer and did not have a monitor or keyboard like modern ones. Users entered instructions through switches and lights on the front panel. On January 12, 2011, 49 of the 50 states had snow on the ground. That is nearly 71% of the country. The only state without snow was Florida. This event was due to an intense cold wave that affected much of the United States, combined with several consecutive winter storms which allowed snow to cover unusual regions, including southern areas where this phenomenon is rare. The Great Gatsby originally sold very poorly, with only 20,000 copies sold in its first year of publication. In fact, F. Scott Fitzgerald died believing his work was a failure. If only he could see it now. Highlighters are usually yellow because they do not leave a gray shadow when a photocopy is made. The fluorescent tone reflects a lot of light and allows the text to remain readable when copying documents. That is why this color became the standard when these markers began to become popular in offices and schools. There is a flower called the corpse flower, which is named that because it smells like rotting and decomposing flesh, and it only blooms every 7 to 10 years. This odor attracts insects such as flies and carrion beetles that act as pollinators. In addition, during its brief blooming, it can generate heat to better disperse the scent, and it can reach impressive heights, making it one of the largest and most striking flowers in the world. Rockall is an uninhabited granite islet in the Atlantic Ocean. Fewer than 20 people have been there, which means more people have landed on the surface of the moon than have landed on Rockall. There are at least 38 places called Springfield in the United States, but the Springfield of The Simpsons is based on Springfield, Oregon. The creator of the series, Matt Groening, grew up in the nearby city of Portland and took many details from that area for the show. He also chose the name Springfield because it is very common and allows many people to imagine that the town could be their own. There is a signpost forest just outside Watson Lake, Yukon. It began in 1942 when a soldier named Carl K. Lindley was injured while working on the Alaska Highway. He was taken to the Army Air Station in Watson Lake to recover, and while he was there, he felt homesick. So he decided to put up a sign from Danville, Illinois, his hometown. Tourists continued the tradition, and today there are 72,000 signs from around the world. When Gary Nell, then president of Sesame Workshop, was asked about the relationship between Bert and Ernie, he explained that the characters are designed to represent a close friendship and teach values like coexistence and respect. He pointed out that, being puppets, they do not have a defined orientation, as their main purpose is educational and focused on children. In the Norwegian army, there is a penguin that holds the rank of colonel-in-chief. It is a king penguin at the Edinburgh Zoo named Niels Olav. The tradition began in the 1970s, when the Norwegian Royal Guard adopted the bird as their official mascot. Over the years, it has been symbolically promoted several times and participates in military ceremonies. Since the first nuclear test explosion on July 16, 1945, at least 8 nations have detonated 2,054 nuclear test explosions at dozens of test sites around the world. One of the main reasons night vision goggles are green is because the human eye is more sensitive to wavelengths of light near 555 nanometers, that is, green, and can distinguish more shades of this color than any other. The 1996 movie Twister was the first to be released on DVD. The format officially debuted that same year and promised better image quality, interactive menus, and additional material. Over time, the DVD almost completely replaced VHS and became the main home movie format for more than a decade. Walmart employs 2.3 million people worldwide. This makes it one of the largest private employers on the planet, with operations in numerous countries. Its enormous workforce ranges from physical stores to distribution centers and digital platforms, allowing it to manage a massive logistics network capable of supplying millions of products daily on a large scale. It is not entirely true that no two snowflakes are alike. Snowflakes actually fall into just one of 35 different shapes. These shapes correspond to general classifications based on how ice crystallizes depending on temperature and humidity, such as plates, columns, or dendrites. However, within each category, microscopic variations are practically infinite, making it extremely unlikely that two snowflakes are identical in every detail. Rhinoceroses can run faster than a human, but weigh about the same as a pickup truck. And since you asked, yes, they communicate by smelling the droppings of other rhinos to stay with the correct herd. These animals can reach speeds close to 31 miles per hour, despite weighing more than approximately 4,400 pounds. They also use piles of dung called middens, where different rhinos leave chemical signals that indicate territory, identity, and reproductive status. According to a study conducted by Japanese researcher Hiroshi Nitono, looking at images of cute animals such as puppies and pandas at work not only improves your mood, but also increases your attention to detail and overall performance. A study conducted in 2010 shows that women feel more attracted to men who wear red. The color makes men appear more powerful and of higher status, which leads to attraction. Research in psychology suggests that red is associated with signals of dominance and confidence, which can unconsciously influence perception. This effect has also been observed in competitive and social contexts, where color can alter how a person is evaluated. A pineapple can take up to 2 years to grow. The plant first produces a rosette of leaves for many months before forming the fruit in the center. After flowering, the fruit needs around 6 months to fully mature, which makes pineapple cultivation relatively slow compared with other tropical fruits. The Olm salamander has a maximum lifespan of more than 100 years. This cave-dwelling amphibian, known for its pale skin and lack of pigmentation, lives in dark caves in Europe and can go long periods without feeding, reducing its metabolism to a minimum. In addition, its slow pace of life and limited exposure to predators contribute to its extraordinary longevity compared to other amphibians. Growing a beard can have health benefits, such as protecting you from the sun, preventing asthma attacks, and even slowing the aging process. Facial hair can act as a natural barrier against ultraviolet rays and help retain moisture in the skin, reducing dryness. Additionally, it can partially filter dust and allergens from the environment, which in some cases helps reduce respiratory irritation. On September 28, 2006, the city of Reykjavik and its surrounding areas in Iceland turned off all public lighting for half an hour, while an astronomer talked about the stars and constellations on the radio. The initiative aimed to allow residents to observe the night sky with less light pollution. During those minutes, many people went outside to look at constellations and learn to identify them. Researchers found one of the first Iron Maidens in a castle in Nuremberg, Germany. An Iron Maiden is a device where a person is placed inside a sarcophagus with spikes on the inner surface. Grumpy Cat, whose real name was Tardar Sauce, generated millions of dollars thanks to its internet fame. Through paid appearances, book deals, advertising campaigns, and a wide range of merchandise, it became one of the most commercially successful animals in digital culture. By the year 2020, the number of Chinese men of marriageable age will exceed the number of women in the same situation by 30 million. This imbalance is partly related to decades of cultural preference for sons and the former one-child policy. Demographers have warned that this difference may have important social effects. Lyme disease received its name because it was first recognized in 1975, when researchers found that a large number of children in Lyme, Connecticut, were being diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. Jay-Z, the Notorious B.I.G., Busta Rhymes, and DMX all went to the same high school in Brooklyn. In fact, Busta Rhymes and Jay-Z once had a rap battle in the cafeteria. Cotton candy, which is famous for being bad for our teeth, was actually invented by a dentist named William Morrison. He created it together with a confectioner for a fair in the early 20th century, using a machine that melted sugar and spun it into fine threads. Interestingly, the product was sold as a fun and affordable novelty, despite the contradiction with its creator's profession. For every human on Earth, there are 1,500,000,000 insects. Sweet dreams. Insects represent most of the animal biodiversity on the planet and live in practically every ecosystem. Their enormous numbers are due to their rapid reproduction, small size, and great capacity to adapt to different environments. The average person has 2 million sweat glands. This disorder is also known as trimethylamminuria and is related to the body's inability to break down that substance in the liver. Although it is usually not dangerous, it can cause significant social difficulties, and in some cases, it is managed with specific diets and certain daily care. Professor Sam Van Aken from Syracuse University created the Tree of 40 Fruits, a multicolored tree that produces, you guessed it, more than 40 different types of fruit. This project combines art and science, as it is achieved through careful grafting of different varieties of stone fruits such as peaches, plums, and apricots onto a single tree. In addition to its visual value, it also aims to preserve old species that are disappearing. A World of Warcraft player named Bradster has 36 accounts and attacks himself on 11 computers to level up. This type of practice is known among players as multiboxing, where one person controls several characters at the same time. Some use programs or special keyboards to synchronize actions and advance faster within the game. The barrel-eye fish has a completely transparent head. It lives at depths of about 6,560 to 8,530 feet, where darkness approaches absolute black. Its tube-shaped eyes are oriented upward to detect silhouettes of prey, but they can rotate forward when it feeds. Inside its head, these organs can be clearly seen, protected by a fluid that maintains their sensitivity in that extreme environment. There is an app called Wakey, where, instead of a normal alarm, you can be woken up by a call from a stranger somewhere else in the world. An American television network used recorded bird sounds during golf tournaments. They stopped doing it when an expert bird watcher realized that they had played the sound of a bird species that was not native to the area where the tournament was taking place. There are 8 levels of charity in Judaism, with the highest being supporting someone or helping them find a job so they can become self-sufficient. More than 1/3 of the airports in the world are in the United States. This is partly due to the enormous size of the country and the large number of domestic flights. Many small cities have regional airports, making the United States air network one of the densest on the planet. There is a genetic disease called fish odor syndrome, where a person excretes an excess of a chemical substance called TMA in their urine, sweat, and breath that makes them smell like rotten fish. Although Zambia has some very fertile land, they do not have agriculture there because every time crops are grown, the local hippos come out and eat everything. In 1998, construction worker Travis Bogomil was accidentally shot with a nail gun that embedded a 3.25-inch nail into his skull. The nail lodged in the area of the brain that normally handles processing mathematics. He was completely fine after the nail was removed, except that his math skills were no longer what they used to be. Originally, Yahoo was called Jerry's Guide to the World Wide Web, after one of its creators, Jerry Yang. It was officially incorporated on March 2, 1995. In 2004, during the annual football game between Harvard and Yale, Yale students tricked Harvard students into holding signs that spelled out, "We suck," telling them it would spell, "Go Harvard." And even so, Harvard ended up winning the game. A Norwegian boy escaped from a wolf by playing a song by the band Megadeth on his cell phone. The boy was walking through the forest when the animal came too close. To scare it away, he played music at full volume from his phone, and the unexpected noise made the wolf retreat so the boy could return home safely. According to research, our voices change when we encounter people we find attractive. These vocal modulations tend to be subtle, and the speaker is generally not aware of the change. For example, many people adjust their tone, rhythm, or intonation to sound more pleasant or interesting during interaction. The Academy refused to nominate the 1982 movie Tron for the Visual Effects Award because they said it was cheating by using computers. At that time, the use of computer-generated graphics was something completely new in cinema. Over time, that technology became standard, and today, it dominates most visual effects in Hollywood. Echidnas, also known as spiny anteaters, have a very particular reproductive characteristic. Their reproductive organ has 4 heads. Interestingly, they do not use it to urinate, and it only becomes visible during the reproductive process. In 2012, a man named Seth Horvitz ordered a television on Amazon and instead received a military-grade assault rifle. You cannot plug a PlayStation into that. You only need 39 digits of pi to calculate the circumference of the observable universe with a margin of error smaller than the diameter of a hydrogen atom. LSD, or acid, was legal in California until 1966. Its use became popular during the 1960s, especially in cultural and experimental contexts, before being banned due to concerns about its psychological effects. After it was made illegal, it became a controlled substance throughout the United States, although in recent years, there has been renewed scientific interest in studying its possible therapeutic applications under strict medical conditions. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, Canada was actually the first Western nation to declare war on Japan. The United States followed the next day. This happened because Canada had greater autonomy to declare war independently at that time, while other Allied countries took a bit longer to formalize their response. In 2004, a bottle of wine costing only $2 defeated 2,300 other wines in an international competition. The wine was from the Australian brand known as 2 Buck Chuck, sold in supermarkets at a very low price. The result surprised many experts and showed that price does not always determine perceived quality in a blind tasting. It has been discovered that seawater in the Port of Boston in Massachusetts Bay contains caffeine. Although the traces are tiny, they are present, from 40 to 16 nanograms in the Port of Boston and from 5.2 to 71 nanograms in Massachusetts Bay. These compounds mainly arrive through treated wastewater, since caffeine is a common indicator of human activity, and its presence helps scientists track emerging contaminants in marine ecosystems. In Germany, there is something called street pong, where there are touchscreens installed at traffic lights so you can play pong with people on the other side of the street. This project was designed to make waiting more entertaining and also to encourage pedestrians to obey traffic signals. In 1958, Ford designed a car called the Ford Nucleon, which was expected to have a miniature nuclear reactor in the back to generate its energy. The developers of the game Fallout were inspired by this concept for the vehicles that appear in the acclaimed series. Abraham Lincoln was in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. He had an imposing physical size of 6 feet 4 inches, was widely known for his wrestling skills, and only had one recorded defeat in 12 years. James W. Rogers was the last man executed by a firing squad in the United States. His final request was a bulletproof vest. This type of execution was much more common in the past, especially in military contexts, but over time it was replaced by methods considered more modern. Today, it remains extremely rare and is only allowed under very specific circumstances in some states. According to mathematicians, there are 177,147 ways to tie a necktie, and you do not even know one. This number was calculated by researchers who analyzed all possible combinations of movements when tying a tie. The famous Windsor knot is only one among thousands, although most people always use the same one out of habit. The Witwatersrand Basin in South Africa, which is only 2.7 square miles, has produced more gold than any other continent, about 50,000 tons over 120 years, which is nearly half of all the gold ever mined. There is a pub in Athlone, Ireland, called Sean's Bar, that has been open since the year 900 after Christ. Carrie Fisher did not wear underwear in Star Wars because George Lucas convinced her by arguing that in a galaxy far, far away, no one wore underwear. Cats have adapted to fall from great heights. When they fall, they reach terminal velocity and rotate their bodies to place their paws underneath them and land properly. It is evolution. This phenomenon is known as the righting reflex and allows them to orient themselves in the air in a matter of seconds. Additionally, their flexible bone structure and low body weight help absorb impact, increasing their chances of surviving even significant falls. Trains in Japan are so punctual that even if they arrive 5 minutes late, the staff must apologize to the passengers. When a train is an hour late or more, the apology even appears in the news. Railway companies also provide delay certificates, so passengers can justify arriving late to work or school. To honor Jamaican sprinter Usain Bolt, Berlin gave him his own piece of the Berlin Wall that was 12 feet tall. It weighed nearly 3 tons. He is not going to take that home, right? Actor Steven Seagal received a humanitarian award from PETA in 1999 for preventing the export of baby elephants from South Africa to Japan. Martha Stewart ended her relationship with Anthony Hopkins after seeing him in the movie The Silence of the Lambs. She said in an interview that after seeing Hopkins' performance as Hannibal Lecter, she could not stop associating him with that character. The performance was so intense that it was impossible for her to see him the same way. Tennis player Vitas Gerulaitis lost to Jimmy Connors 16 times before finally winning a match. After winning, he said, "Nobody beats Vitas Gerulaitis 17 times in a row." What a funny guy. In 1923, Bobby the Wonder Dog traveled 2,550 miles across the United States to reunite with his owners after getting lost in Indiana during a family road trip. Koala fingerprints are almost identical to human fingerprints. They have even interfered with crime scene investigations. So now you know, if you are a criminal, you should bring a koala as an accomplice. Even under a microscope, they can be very difficult to distinguish from human ones because they show very similar patterns of arches, loops, and whorls. Boston has poems on its sidewalks that can only be seen when it rains. They are painted with a special waterproof paint that only appears when it is wet. Microwaves use more electricity to power their clocks than to heat food, so you might want to consider unplugging them when you are not using them. In reality, standby consumption is constant but low, while heating food requires much more energy in a short time. Even so, that passive consumption can add up with daily use, and reducing it by unplugging the appliance or using power strips can help save electricity in the long term. The most common last name in the world is Chen. It is especially common in China and in Chinese communities around the planet. Because of the enormous size of the Chinese population, last names such as Chen, Li, or Wang are among the most widespread in the world and can be shared by tens of millions of people. An Australian crocodile measuring 19 feet long has a bite force of 3,700 pounds. That is the highest bite force ever recorded. This power is due to the extremely robust musculature of its jaw, designed to firmly hold large prey. In addition, its teeth are not made for chewing, but for gripping and spinning prey in the water in a movement known as the death roll, which helps tear it apart. Betty Davis and Joan Crawford were rivals for a long time. When Joan Crawford died, Betty Davis said, "You should never say bad things about the dead, only good. Joan Crawford is dead. Good." The voice of Chewbacca from Star Wars was created using vocalizations of bears, as well as the sound of walruses, badgers, and the howls of sick animals. George R.R. Martin was so impressed with Jack Gleason's portrayal of Joffrey in Game of Thrones that he sent him a personal letter saying, "Congratulations on your wonderful performance. Everyone hates you." You are more likely to come up with a great idea while doing something monotonous, such as exercising, driving, or showering. This is because we are more relaxed and less distracted, allowing dopamine to flow through our body and activate our thoughts. There are currently 32 closed-circuit cameras within approximately 656 feet around the apartment where George Orwell had the idea for the acclaimed novel 1984. The irony is often mentioned because the work describes a society where everyone is constantly watched by Big Brother. According to a report from the National Center for Health Statistics of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, American men now weigh an average of 196 pounds, 15 pounds more than 20 years ago, and women weigh 168 pounds on average, which is 16 pounds more than 20 years ago. Currently, there are plans in Berlin to create something called the House of One, which is a synagogue, a church, and a mosque, all under one roof. This interfaith project aims to promote dialogue and coexistence among different traditions, bringing together Jewish, Christian, and Muslim communities in a single space. The initiative arose from local religious leaders and has received international support as a symbol of cooperation and mutual respect in a city marked by its cultural diversity. An average horse can produce up to 15 horsepower. The term horsepower was originally defined in the 18th century to compare the power of steam engines with the strength of real horses. Interestingly, a horse under maximum effort can generate much more than 1 horsepower for brief periods. The unborn offspring of a female sea louse actually chew their way out from inside the mother in order to be born. A small town in Japan called Inakadate has revitalized itself by creating art in rice fields. This style of art is made by combining a variety of rice grains in different patterns to create stunning images. Before becoming famous, Katy Perry released a Christian rock album under her real name, Katy Hudson, when she was 16 years old. It sold fewer than 200 copies. She was also a backing singer for the band POD. The Lehei Ledu Wildlife Zoo in Chongqing, China, places visiting people in cages instead of the animals. The cages are stocked by lions and tigers, so guests are warned to keep their fingers and hands inside the cage at all times.
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and share it with your friends. Subscribe so you don't miss more interesting content. Leave your comments and click on any of these videos. See you next time.